She was just a maid, invisible, silent, and dismissed by all. But when the cruel fiancé of the powerful Duke of Ashworth mocked the very legacy of his family, the maid did the unthinkable. She spoke back. The slap echoed through the grand hall, sealing her fate. But what started as an act of defiance became a journey of revenge, secrets, and a love that would shatter the foundations of the aristocracy. They thought they had dismissed a servant, but they had just created the one woman who could silence them all. Stick around to hear the story of the maid who dared to speak back, became the Duchess who silenced them all. The cold of the marble floor seeped through the thin soles of Annalise's shoes, a constant reminder of her place at Ashworth Manor. It was 1878, and the world was governed by a strict, unspoken code. The rich ruled, and the poor served. Annalise, daughter of a disgraced and deceased classics scholar, knew this code, even if she despised it. She was now a housemaid, her mind full of Latin verse and philosophy, while her hands grew raw from lye soap. Ashworth Manor was the seat of Arthur, the Duke of Ashworth, a man spoken of in whispers by the staff. He was powerful, wealthy, and, most importantly, perpetually absent, tending to his vast shipping interests in London. In his absence, the estate was ruled by his formidable mother, the Dowager Duchess Augusta, a woman who seemed carved from the same unforgiving marble as the hall floors. But today, the manor was alive with a nervous energy. The Duke was home, and he was bringing his intended. Lady Beatrice Langley was everything Annalise was not. She was golden, draped in French silk, and possessed an arrogance that radiated from her like a chill. She swept into the entrance hall, her gaze flicking over the lined-up servants as if they were furniture. Her nose wrinkled in distaste. "Augusta, darling," Beatrice drawled, offering the dowager her cheek. "The drive was simply dreadful. The dust from the common roads is unbearable. You must have the driveway re-gravelled at once." "Of course, dear," the dowager replied, her voice smooth. "Arthur, see that Beatrice is comfortable. We will take tea in the drawing-room." Arthur, the Duke of Ashworth, was a surprise. He was tall and dark-haired, with an imposing posture, but his eyes were not cruel. They were tired. He gave a curt nod to the staff, his gaze passing over Annalise without note, and followed the two women. Annalise and two other maids, Sarah and Mary, were tasked with serving the tea. Annalise kept her eyes down, her movements precise. She set the fine china on the low table, her hand steady despite the knot in her stomach. Lady Beatrice was complaining again. "And the gallery, Augusta. It is so dark. All those dreadful heavy portraits of dead ancestors. It's morbid." "Those dreadful portraits, Beatrice, are my family's legacy," the Duke said, his voice a low rumble. He was standing by the window, looking out over the grounds. Beatrice waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, pooh, Arthur. Legacy is one thing, but taste is another. That painting in the vestibule, the one of the man with the dreadful moustache, it's clearly a poor Dutch copy. It should be moved to the servants' wing." Annalise froze. She had spent hours cleaning that vestibule. She knew the painting intimately. It was her one solace in the house, a small piece of the cultured world she had lost. The Dowager Duchess Augusta narrowed her eyes. "Beatrice, you are speaking of the portrait of Sir Reginald Ashworth. It is considered a fine work." "It's a poorly executed copy, and it makes the entire entry look cheap," Beatrice insisted, tapping her spoon against her cup. A silence stretched. Annalise's heart hammered against her ribs. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. "Truth, Annalise, is the only currency that matters." She shouldn't. She mustn't. It meant dismissal. It meant the workhouse. But the word slipped out, clear and steady in the opulent room. "Forgive me, my lady." Every head snapped toward her. Sarah, the other maid, let out a tiny, terrified gasp. Lady Beatrice's perfectly plucked eyebrows rose. "What did you say?" Beatrice demanded. Annalise kept her gaze respectfully lowered, but her voice did not waver. "You are mistaken, my lady. It is not a Dutch copy. It is an original study by Sir Thomas Lawrence, a preliminary piece for his larger commission of the 3rd Earl of Pembroke. The brushwork in the lapels and the specific use of lead white for the highlights are signature to his transitional period, around 1805. The silence that followed was no longer polite. It was absolute, heavy, and terrifying. Lady Beatrice's face, a mask of aristocratic beauty, slowly contorted. Her pale skin flushed a deep, mottled red. The Duke, Arthur, had turned fully from the window, his tired eyes now sharp and fixed intently on Annalise. The Dowager Duchess looked as if Annalise had just sprouted a second head. "How dare you?" Beatrice whispered, her voice shaking with rage. "You, a servant, dare to correct me?" I apologize, my lady. I only meant, you meant to insult me. You meant to imply I am ignorant." Beatrice surged to her feet. "Augusta, I will not stay in a house where the staff are permitted to be insolent." "Annalise," the Dowager's voice was ice. "You will leave the room." "No," Beatrice hissed. She stepped forward, her face inches from Annalise's. "You will apologize for your grotesque impertinence." Annalise looked at the furious woman. She saw the panic behind the rage, the humiliation of being exposed, and in that moment, Annalise's fear evaporated, replaced by a cold resolve. "I cannot apologize for speaking the truth, my lady," Annalise said quietly. Slap! The sound was sharp, violent, and echoed in the vast room. Annalise's head snapped to the side, her cheek stinging instantly. Sarah cried out. "Insolent wretch!" Beatrice spat. "That is enough." The Duke's voice cut through the air like a cannon shot. He had not moved from his spot, but his presence suddenly filled the room. "Beatrice, sit down," he commanded. "Arthur, did you hear her? I said, sit down." Beatrice, trembling with fury, slowly sank back into the settee. The Duke's eyes rested on Annalise. She met his gaze, refusing to cry, though her cheek felt like it was on fire. He studied her, not as a master studying a servant, but as a man studying a puzzle. "You," he said. "What is your name?" "Annalise, Your Grace." "And you are an art scholar, Annalise." His voice was laced with a dry, unreadable irony. "My father was a scholar, Your Grace. He taught me." "I see." He glanced at the painting in the vestibule, visible through the open doorway. "Sir Thomas Lawrence, you said?" "Yes, Your Grace." He looked back at Beatrice, whose face was a thundercloud. He looked at his mother, who was watching him with a hawk-like intensity. "Mrs. Davies," the Duke said, addressing the housekeeper who hovered nervously at the door. "See to Annalise. Take her to your office. Wait for me there." Annalise curtsied, her back rigid, and walked from the room. She did not look back, but she could feel the weight of 3 pairs of eyes on her, the Dowager's, filled with cold fury, Beatrice's, burning with hatred, and the Duke's, filled with an unsettling, dangerous curiosity. The housekeeper's office was a small, cluttered room in the belly of the house, smelling of beeswax and old paper. Mrs. Davies, the housekeeper, was a stern woman who had never liked Annalise's quiet airs. Now she regarded the girl with open contempt. "Well, you've done it now," Mrs. Davies sniffed, seating herself behind her desk, speaking out of turn, correcting her ladyship. "It's dismissal, of course. You'll be lucky to avoid the magistrate for gross insolence." Annalise stood silently, her hands clasped. The stinging on her cheek had subsided to a dull throb, She was not afraid of dismissal. She was terrified of the workhouse. Her father had died penniless, his academic reputation ruined by a jealous rival. Service was the only thing that had kept her from starvation. The door opened, and the Duke of Ashworth entered. Mrs. Davies scrambled to her feet. "Your Grace, I was just telling the girl." "You may leave us, Mrs. Davies," Arthur said, not unkindly. "But, Your Grace, the protocols—" "Leave us." Mrs. Davies shot Annalise a venomous look and scurried out, closing the door firmly. The Duke did not sit. He prowled the small office, his large frame making the room feel like a cage. He stopped in front of her, forcing her to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. "You have a very red mark on your face," he observed mildly. "It will fade, Your Grace. My mother is demanding I have you thrown out. Lady Beatrice is demanding I have you whipped." Annalise's stomach clenched, but she held her ground. "And you, Your Grace?" A flicker of something, amusement, crossed his features. "I am demanding to know who your father was." The question surprised her. "His name was Robert Croft, Your Grace. He was the vicar of St. Jude's in Wiltshire. But before that, he was a fellow at Oxford, specializing in classical antiquity and restoration art." "Robert Croft," Arthur murmured, testing the name. "I do not know it." "He was not famous," Annalise said. "He published a paper that contradicted the findings of Lord Harrington, a man with significant influence. My father was right, but Lord Harrington was powerful. My father lost his position. We were impoverished. So he taught you. Art, philosophy. Latin, I'd wager. And Greek, Your Grace." The Duke stared at her. A maid who reads Greek. And here I am, engaged to a woman who believes Sir Thomas Lawrence is a Dutch copyist. He said the last part softly, almost to himself. He turned back to her, his expression hardening. "Do you know what you did today, Annalise? You humiliated my future wife. You embarrassed my mother. You disrupted the order of this entire household." "I spoke the truth, Your Grace. Is that not valued here?" "Valued? In society?" He let out a short, harsh laugh. "Truth is a weapon, girl. And you aimed it at your superior. It is a form of suicide." "Then I shall die of it," Annalise said, her voice low. "I will not, however, die of ignorance." The Duke's dark eyes bored into hers. Annalise felt a strange pull, a current of understanding passing between them. He was a man trapped by his own life, by the expectations of women like Beatrice and his mother, and he saw in her, perhaps, the one thing he lacked: freedom. "My mother will not allow you to remain a housemaid," he said finally. "Lady Beatrice would see it as a personal insult every time you served her tea." "I understand. I will pack my things." "I did not say you were dismissed." Annalise looked up, confused. "The East Wing Library," he said, as if thinking aloud. "It has been neglected for decades. My grandfather's collection is a disaster. The ledgers are unreadable, the books uncatalogued. It requires someone who can read Latin and Greek, someone who knows art, and someone who can be quiet." Annalise's heart leapt. "Your Grace?" "You are no longer a housemaid," Arthur stated. "You will be attached to the library. Your task is to organize and catalogue the entire Ashworth collection. You will have a room in the attics, far from the main household. You will take your meals there. You will not be seen in the main house. You will not interact with the other staff, and you will never speak to Lady Beatrice or my mother again. Do you understand these terms? It was a form of exile, but it was also a lifeline. More than that, it was a reprieve. The library, a room full of books. It was more than she could have dreamed of." Yes, Your Grace. I understand perfectly. Good. He moved to the door. Mrs. Davies will arrange your transfer. And Annalise? Your Grace? You were correct about the Lawrence. I had it authenticated myself 10 years ago. Lady Beatrice, as you noted, is an imbecile. He left the office, leaving Annalise alone in the sudden, ringing silence, her heart hammering with a terrifying new emotion. Hope. The Ashworth Library was not one room, but a suite of 3, culminating in a vast 2-story rotunda with a domed ceiling. It was cold, and a thick layer of dust coated every surface. But to Annalise, it was heaven. Sunlight streamed through the tall, grimy windows, illuminating motes of dust that danced over tens of thousands of books. She was given a small, simple room in the attic, clean and private. As the Duke had ordered, she was isolated. Her food was left on a tray outside her door. She saw no one but Mrs. Davies, who delivered her instructions with a clipped, resentful air. But Annalise did not care. She had a purpose. She worked from dawn until the last light failed. Her hands, once raw from soap, now stained with ink and book dust. She found treasures hidden in the chaos, a first folio Shakespeare, a hand-illuminated book of hours, volumes of philosophy that she thought she would never read again. She began the long, meticulous process of cataloguing. Her fine, scholarly handwriting filled ledger after ledger. She found letters tucked inside books, receipts for art, journals from long-dead Ashworth ancestors. She was, piece by piece, assembling the true history of the family. Weeks passed. The chill of autumn gave way to the deep cold of winter. Annalise worked by candlelight, wrapped in a heavy shawl. One evening, deep in her work, she heard the great library doors open. She froze. No one ever came here. The Duke of Ashworth stood in the doorway, a lamp in his hand. He was in his shirt sleeves, his coat and waistcoat absent. "Your Grace," she said, rising instantly and curtsying. "Do not let me disturb you," he said, his voice quiet in the vast space. I often come here when the house becomes too loud." "I have made some progress," she said, gesturing to the newly organized shelves. "The Greek philosophy section is complete, and I am halfway through the Roman histories." He walked over to the desk, looking at her open ledger. He noted her neat columns, the cross-references, the notes in the margins. "You are methodical," he said. "My father taught me that order is the foundation of all learning, Your Grace." He picked up a small volume she had set aside. Ovid. Metamorphoses. He opened it, reading the Latin aloud, his pronunciation flawless. He looked at her. "Do you read Ovid?" "My mind is bent to tell of forms changed into new bodies," she replied instantly. A slow smile touched the Duke's lips. It transformed his severe face, making him look younger, less burdened. "You are wasted here, Miss Croft." "I do not feel wasted, Your Grace. I feel saved." He looked at her, the lamplight catching the intelligence in her eyes. He had spent the last several weeks in protracted, mind-numbing dinners with Beatrice and his mother, negotiating marriage settlements with Beatrice's father, Lord Langley. He had listened to endless gossip about Lord Harrington's new horse or the Duchess of Leinster's dreadful ball gown. This was the first real conversation he'd had in a month. "Tell me," he said, sitting on the edge of the heavy oak desk, "what do you make of the 7th Duke's collection?" "My great-grandfather." "He was a man of passion, but little discipline," Annalise said, forgetting her station for a moment. "He bought duplicates of everything. He has 3 copies of Virgil's Aeneid, all from the same printing, but he seems to have missed Pliny the Elder entirely. His art folios, however, are magnificent." They talked for over an hour. They talked about books, about history, about the stars. He asked her questions, and he listened to her answers. Annalise spoke with a passion she thought had been extinguished in her. Arthur in turn spoke of London, of the pressures of his title, of the crushing weight of duty. It became a ritual. He would come to the library late at night, twice, sometimes 3 times a week. It was their secret world, a sanctuary of the mind. Annalise felt a dangerous warmth bloom in her chest, a respect and admiration for this man that was rapidly turning into something deeper, and she saw, in the way he looked at her, a mirrored sentiment. But they were not the only ones who noticed. In the main drawing room, the Dowager Duchess Augusta and Lady Beatrice were engaged in their own ritual, plotting. "He spends hours in that dusty old library," Beatrice snapped, pacing the Aubusson carpet. "He has postponed the setting of the wedding date twice, Augusta. He is pulling away, and it is all her fault." "The girl," Augusta said, her voice flat. "I knew she was trouble. Arthur was always susceptible to novelty. He is bored, and she is different." "She is a servant," Beatrice shrieked. "A nothing. He is making a mockery of me, of us." "Calm yourself, Beatrice. Hysterics are unbecoming," the Dowager said, though her own eyes were cold with calculation. "You are right. The girl is a threat. Not to your position. Arthur will marry you. I will ensure it. But to the stability of the transition. She is a distraction. She must be removed." "Dismissed! Thrown into the street!" "No," Augusta said thoughtfully. "That will only make Arthur brood. He will see her as a martyr. If she is to be removed, it must be done in such a way that he despises the very thought of her." "She must be removed in disgrace." Beatrice stopped pacing. "What do you mean?" "I mean," the Dowager said, "that a girl who rose so high, so fast, must have done so through manipulation, and manipulative people are, by their nature, untrustworthy." "She's a thief," Beatrice said, a slow, malicious smile spreading across her face. "Precisely," Augusta replied, "and I know exactly what she will steal." She went to her private safe, hidden behind a landscape painting. "My sapphire brooch, a gift from the late Duke. Arthur knows I cherish it above all things." "But how?" "We will use Mrs. Davies. She loathes the girl. She believes Annalise has used a common-born cunning to bewitch the Duke. She will be more than happy to assist in restoring the natural order." The plan was simple. Mrs. Davies would use her master key to enter the library, while Annalise was in her attic room. She would take the brooch from the Dowager's jewelry box, to which she had access for cleaning, and hide it amongst Annalise's meagre belongings. "Tomorrow," Beatrice said, "we will be hosting the luncheon for Lord and Lady Harrington." "Perfect," the Dowager said. "A house full of guests, the perfect audience for the discovery of a treacherous thief." She looked at Beatrice. "Arthur may be fascinated by her mind, but he is still the Duke. He will not and cannot tolerate a common criminal in his home." The day of the luncheon was tense. Annalise could hear the distant sounds of carriages arriving, the murmur of guests in the formal gardens below the library window. She felt a familiar pang of loneliness, an isolation made sharper by the memory of her late-night conversations with Arthur. He had not come to the library in 3 days, and she missed their intellectual sparring. She was engrossed in repairing the binding of a 17th-century manuscript when the library doors burst open. It was not the Duke. Mrs. Davies stood there, flanked by 2 large footmen. Behind them, her face a mask of triumphant spite, was Lady Beatrice. "There she is," Beatrice announced, as if presenting a criminal. "The little library mouse." "Miss Croft," Mrs. Davies said, her voice dripping with false authority. You are to come with us. A grievous theft has occurred. Annalise's blood ran cold. Theft? What are you talking about? The Dowager Duchess's sapphire brooch, Beatrice said, stepping forward. A priceless heirloom. It is missing from her jewelry box. And what has that to do with me? Annalise asked, her voice shaking slightly. I have not left this wing in weeks. Oh, we know, Mrs. Davies said. But you have a key to the attic passageway, which connects to the main house. You have access. This is absurd. I would never— Search her room, Beatrice commanded the footman. You cannot, Annalise cried, moving to block them. One of the footmen shoved her aside. Stay put, miss. They marched from the library, dragging a protesting Annalise with them. They went up the narrow attic stairs to her small, cold room. It was sparse, a bed, a wash-stand, a small trunk for her few clothes. Tear it apart, Beatrice ordered. The men, clearly uncomfortable but obeying the command of the Duke's fiancé, began their work. They upended her thin mattress. They opened her trunk, tossing her 2 simple dresses and her father's worn copy of the Iliad onto the floor. There's nothing here, my lady, one footman said. Look again, Beatrice shrieked. Mrs. Davies stepped forward. Perhaps, my lady, it is hidden within something. She picked up the old book. She riffled through the pages, and then she stopped. Tucked between the pages detailing the grief of Achilles, a flash of brilliant blue and silver glittered. Mrs. Davies dramatically pulled out the Dowager's sapphire brooch. Ah, she said, holding it aloft. As I suspected. Annalise stared, horrified. No, I've never seen that before in my life. Someone put it there. A likely story, Beatrice sneered. A thief and a liar. You thought you were so clever, didn't you? Worming your way into the Duke's confidence, sleeping in his library, and all the while you were just a common little thief. I am not, I swear it. Annalise's eyes darted between the faces. Mrs. Davies, smug. Beatrice, victorious. Take her downstairs, Beatrice commanded. The Duke will deal with her. She was dragged through the servant passages and shoved into the main drawing room, where the luncheon party had just concluded. The Duke, his mother, and several guests, including the oily and influential Lord Harrington, were taking coffee. What is the meaning of this? The Dowager demanded, seeing Annalise's dishevelled state. We found her, Augusta, Beatrice announced, her voice ringing with drama. We found the thief. Mrs. Davies stepped forward and presented the brooch to the Dowager, who let out a perfectly timed gasp of horror. My brooch. In her possession. All eyes turned to Annalise. Lord Harrington peered at her through his monocle. Is this the chit from Wiltshire? The scholar's daughter? I'd heard she'd fallen low, but theft? Tsk. Annalise looked at the one person who mattered. Your Grace, she pleaded, her voice desperate. Arthur, I didn't do this. You must know I am not a thief. Arthur's face was unreadable. It was carved from granite, his eyes dark and shuttered. He was no longer the man who discussed Ovid in the candlelight. He was the Duke of Ashworth, and his authority had been challenged in front of his peers. The evidence is compelling, his mother said, her voice cold. Found in her personal belongings. She must be handed over to the magistrate, Arthur. The magistrate? Beatrice scoffed. We should have her transported. A lesson to the other staff. Your Grace, please, Annalise whispered, tears finally stinging her eyes. It is a lie. She— Annalise pointed a shaking finger at Beatrice. She hates me. She did this. Or your mother. They framed me. It was a fatal mistake. The accusation hung in the air, a final, unforgivable breach of class and protocol. The Dowager Duchess rose to her full, imposing height. That is enough. You will be silent. Arthur held up a hand. The room fell quiet. He walked slowly toward Annalise, his boots echoing on the parquet floor. He stopped in front of her. She searched his face for any sign of the man she knew, any flicker of trust. She found none. He was the Duke. He had to maintain order. The evidence was absolute. Her word was nothing. "You have been in my employ for 4 months, Miss Croft," he said, his voice terrifyingly formal. "You were shown considerable favor. Arthur, please. You will address me as Your Grace," he snapped. Annalise flinched, as if he had struck her. "My mother is correct. The evidence is damning. Your accusation against my fiancé and my mother is desperate and vile." "It's the truth," she choked out. "Your truth holds no weight here," he said. "Theft is a crime. My mother demands you be handed to the authorities. By law, she is right." Annalise's knees buckled. The law meant prison. It meant hard labor. "However," the Duke continued, "Lord Harrington has reminded me of your father. Despite his eccentricities, he was a man of the cloth. For his memory, and his alone, I will not involve the magistrate." A small gasp of relief escaped her. "You will be banished from Ashworth. You will leave this house within the hour. You will take nothing but the clothes you wear. One of the footmen will escort you to the county line. If you are ever seen on my lands again, I will have you arrested for trespassing. Do you understand?" It was a death sentence of a different kind, penniless, possessionless, and disgraced. "I understand," she whispered, the fight draining out of her. The one man she had begun to trust, to admire, perhaps even to love, believed she was a common thief. The humiliation was a physical weight, crushing her. "Mrs. Davies, see her out." Annalise did not look back as she was led from the room. She did not see the flash of profound conflict in the Duke's eyes as he turned away, or the triumphant, hateful smile exchanged between Lady Beatrice and the Dowager Duchess. London was a cold, brutal, and indifferent monster. Annalise arrived with nothing, her thin maid's uniform a poor defense against the biting November wind and the soot that choked the air. The few shillings she had saved were in her trunk, back at Ashworth. She sold the only thing of value she had, a small silver locket from her mother, for enough money to rent a bed in a shared, rat-infested room in Cheapside for a week. She looked for work, but she had no references. Worse, the story of her dismissal seemed to have followed her. The network of upper-class service was swift and cruel. She was the thieving maid from Ashworth. No respectable house would have her. She grew thinner, hungrier. The woman who read Greek was now days away from starvation or the workhouse. Desperate, she answered an advertisement tacked to a pub door. It wasn't for service. It was for a scribe. A solicitor on Chancery Lane needed someone with a clear hand and a tolerance for dust. The office of Mr. Barnaby Finch was a monument to organized chaos. It was a dark, cramped space on a second floor, piled floor to ceiling with stacks of vellum, deed boxes and ledgers, all covered in a thick grey blanket of dust. Mr. Finch himself was a creature from within the dust. He was elderly, hunched, with spectacles thick as bottle glass, and a perpetually gruff demeanour. "You're a woman," he grunted, peering at her. "I can read, I can write, and I am not afraid of dust, sir," Annalise said, her voice hoarse from the cold. "Can you read this?" He shoved a 17th century deed in her face. Annalise read the complex, looping script aloud without hesitation. "And this?" He pointed to a Latin phrase in a legal text. She translated it instantly. Mr. Finch stared at her. "You're hired. 3 shillings a week. You start now." "That pile," he pointed to a mountain of paper in the corner, "is the Langley Estate Archive. It's been a mess since 1845. Organize it. By date. and don't speak to me unless the building is on fire." Langley. The name hit her like a physical blow. Lady Beatrice's family. For 2 months, Annalise worked in the dusty silence, fueled by stale tea and bread. It was hard, mind-numbing labor. But as she sorted through the decades-old files, a story began to emerge. The Langleys, while aristocratic, had not always been wealthy. Their massive fortune, the one that made Beatrice such a prize, had come from her grandfather, the 2nd Baron Langley. He had inherited it from a distant, childless cousin. Annalise was sorting a box of correspondence marked Langley v. Langley, disputed, 1846. It was a challenge to the will, brought by another, poorer branch of the family. The case had been dismissed for lack of evidence. Deep in the box, Annalise found a packet of letters tied with a faded ribbon. They were from a private investigator Mr. Finch, or perhaps his predecessor, had hired. The investigator was looking into the will of the childless cousin, a Mr. Richard Langley. The investigator, a man named Thomas Sharp, had suspected the will was a forgery. "The signature is clean," Sharp wrote, "but the codicil, the one that leaves everything to the 2nd Baron, is problematic. The witnesses are a stable hand who vanished and a nursemaid who died of a fever a week after signing." This was interesting, but not proof. Annalise kept digging. At the very bottom of the box, misfiled under invoices, she found a small, tear-stained, folded piece of paper. It was not a legal document. It was a confession. It was from the nursemaid, written on her deathbed. "I cannot meet my God with this lie on my soul," it began. The nursemaid confessed that the 2nd Baron Langley, Beatrice's grandfather, had arrived after Richard Langley had died. The old man had died intestate, without a will. His fortune should have been broken up and passed to the other branch of the family. Beatrice's grandfather, desperate and facing debtor's prison, had forged the will and the codicil himself. He had paid the stable hand to disappear and forced the nursemaid to sign as a witness, threatening her children. "He is a demon," she wrote. "He stole that fortune. It is built on a lie. God forgive me." Annalise sat back, the dusty paper trembling in her hand. Mr. Finch had lost the case because this letter had been misfiled. The entire Langley fortune, Beatrice's dowry, her position, her ability to look down on people like Annalise, was a fraud. The wealth that was supposed to merge with the Ashworth estate was built on a crime. She stared at the letter. This was not a weapon. This was a cannon. She could destroy Lady Beatrice Langley. She could expose her to the entire world. A slow, cold anger, an anger she had suppressed for months, began to burn in her chest. She thought of the slap. She thought of the brooch. She thought of Arthur's face, cold and unforgiving, as he banished her. "Mr. Finch," Annalise said, her voice shaking. The old man looked up, annoyed. "Is the building aflame?" "No, sir. But I believe I have just found the missing evidence in the 1846 Langley dispute. It would seem the entire family fortune is fraudulent." Mr. Finch's eyes widened behind his spectacles. He took the letter, read it, and then read it again. A slow, grim smile spread across his face. "Good God, girl, you've done it." The journey back to Ashworth Manor was starkly different from her arrival. Annalise was not penniless. Mr. Finch, ecstatic at solving a 50-year-old mystery, and at the prospect of the enormous fees his firm would earn from the rightful Langley heirs, had given Annalise a significant reward. She did not travel in a maid's uniform. She wore a deep blue wool traveling suit, modest but of fine quality. She wore a hat with a short veil. She was no longer Annalise the maid. She was Miss Croft, a woman of purpose. She arrived at the grand entrance, not as a servant, but as a visitor. She stepped out of the hired carriage and walked up the main steps. The butler, the same man who had presided over her dismissal, opened the door. He looked at her, his eyes widening in confusion. He recognized her, but the clothes, the bearing, it was all wrong. "May I help you, miss?" he asked, uncertain. "I am here to see the Duke of Ashworth," Annalise said, her voice clear and strong. "My name is Annalise Croft. Tell him it is a matter of urgent legal and personal importance concerning the Langley estate." The butler, thrown by her confidence and the specific, powerful name drop, stammered, "The Duke is engaged, miss, with Lady Beatrice and the Dowager. They are finalizing arrangements." "I am certain he will wish to be interrupted for this," Annalise said. "I will wait in the hall." She stepped past him, into the cold marble hall where she had once stood in terror. She looked at the painting of Sir Reginald Ashworth. She had been right about it, after all. Upstairs, in the drawing-room, the mood was tense. Arthur was staring at the marriage contracts, his pen hovering. "Arthur, for heaven's sake, just sign them," Beatrice said, her voice tight with irritation. "Lord Harrington is waiting to witness. We have delayed this long enough." "I am reviewing the clauses, Beatrice," Arthur said, his voice clipped. In truth, he was miserable. His life felt like a foregone conclusion, a grey, empty stretch of duty. His dismissal of Annalise had haunted him. He had convinced himself it was necessary, that the evidence was too strong. But in the dead of night, he saw her eyes, pleading with him to believe her. His own investigation had yielded nothing. Mrs. Davies stuck to her story, her face a mask of impenetrable loyalty. There was a knock. The butler entered, pale. "Your Grace, forgive the intrusion. There is a Miss Croft here to see you. She says it concerns the Langley estate." Beatrice shot to her feet. "What? That girl? Here? Have her thrown out at once. Have her arrested." But Arthur was already moving. The granite mask was gone. His eyes were blazing. Langley estate. Annalise. He knew instinctively that this was not a coincidence. "Show her in, Phillips," Arthur commanded. "Arthur, no!" his mother protested. "This is an outrage." The drawing-room doors opened. Annalise walked in. The effect was stunning. This was not the timid maid in a grey uniform. This was a woman. Her simple, elegant suit emphasized her poise. Her gaze was not lowered. She looked directly at them, one by one. She saw the Dowager's shock, Beatrice's sputtering, purple-faced rage, and finally, Arthur. His expression was one of profound, unadulterated shock. He had banished a girl. A woman had returned. "You!" Beatrice hissed, finding her voice. "You dare to show your face here, after you were banished for theft? Butler, fetch the constables." "That will not be necessary, Lady Beatrice," Annalise said, her voice echoing in the room. She was holding a leather folio. "For I was not banished for theft. I was banished because you planted the Dowager's brooch in my room." "Lies!" Mrs. Davies, who was in the room, cried out, "Slander!" "I am not here to debate the matter of the brooch, Your Grace," Annalise said, turning to Arthur. "Though I suspect Mrs. Davies's newfound prosperity since my departure would be interesting to investigate." Mrs. Davies went pale. "I am here," Annalise continued, "to discuss the foundation of your impending marriage. I am here to discuss a forgery, a deathbed confession, and the fraudulent claim that props up the entire Langley family." Beatrice's rage faltered, replaced by a flicker of genuine fear. "I don't know what you're talking about. She is insane, Arthur. She is a spurned, mad woman." "Am I?" Annalise opened the folio. I have spent the last 3 months in the employ of Mr. Barnaby Finch of Chancery Lane. I was tasked with organizing the archives of the Langley estate dispute of 1846. Beatrice, who clearly did not know her own family history, looked confused, but the Dowager Duchess, a student of lineage, went very still. "You may not know this, Your Grace," Annalise said to Arthur, "but your fiancée's fortune is not legitimate. Her grandfather, the 2nd Baron Langley, was a desperate man facing debtor's prison. When his wealthy cousin, Richard Langley, died without a will, the 2nd Baron forged one." "This is a preposterous fabrication," Beatrice yelled, lunging for the papers. Arthur caught her wrist. "Let her speak." Annalise laid the documents on the table. "This," she said, tapping the first, "is a copy of the forged will. And this," she laid down the small, tear-stained paper, "is the deathbed confession of the nursemaid, Sarah Watts, who was forced to sign as a witness. It was misfiled for 50 years. It details the entire crime. The stable hand who was the other witness was paid to flee to America. The nursemaid died of consumption, but not before writing this." She looked at Arthur. "The entire Langley fortune, the dowry you are about to accept, the wealth that gives Lady Beatrice her status, is stolen. It belongs by law to the other branch of the Langley family, who, I have learned, are currently working as farmers in Sussex." Silence. Thick, suffocating silence. Beatrice Langley looked at the confession. Her face, which had been red with rage, slowly drained of all colour. She knew it was true. The desperate, grasping fear in her family, the constant obsession with money. It all made sense. "It's a lie," she whispered. But the words had no conviction. "Mr. Finch has already filed a petition with the Crown on behalf of the rightful heirs," Annalise said calmly. "He has the investigators' reports. He has the confession. By this time next year, Lady Beatrice, you will be penniless. Your father will likely be in prison for concealing the fraud." The Dowager Duchess Augusta sank into her chair. She was not horrified by the crime. She was horrified by the scandal. She was horrified that they had almost allied the House of Ashworth with a family of criminals, and, worse, a family of frauds who were about to be poor. Beatrice let out a sound, a half-sob, half-scream. She looked at Arthur, her eyes wild with panic. "Arthur, you must stop this. You must protect me. You can pay this woman off. You can silence her." Arthur looked at Beatrice, this woman he had almost bound himself to, and felt nothing but cold, profound disgust. Then he looked at Annalise. She stood there, poised, holding the truth like a shield. She had been humiliated, assaulted, and banished. She had been starved and forced into poverty. And she had returned, not with insults, but with irrefutable, devastating facts. She had not come to blackmail them. She had come to stop him from making a ruinous mistake. "Get out," Arthur said, his voice deadly quiet. "Arthur," Beatrice whimpered, "get out of my house." He roared the last words. Beatrice stumbled back. She looked at the Dowager. "Augusta!" The Dowager Duchess, for the first time in her life, was silent. She simply stared at the fire, her reputation, her grand plans, turning to ash. Beatrice Langley, with one last hateful look at Annalise, turned and fled the room. The room was silent again. Mrs. Davies was weeping in the corner. "Mrs. Davies," Arthur said, without looking at her, "go to my study. Write a full confession detailing your part in planting the brooch. If you do, I will not have you arrested. I will simply dismiss you. If you lie, I will see you in prison." The housekeeper, broken, fled. Now it was just the three of them, Arthur, his mother, and Annalise. The dowager finally looked up. She looked at Annalise. There was no warmth, but there was a new, grudging respect. "You saved this family from catastrophic ruin, Miss Croft. You could have gone to the papers. You could have blackmailed us." "I am not Lady Beatrice," Annalise said simply. "I did not return for revenge, Your Grace. I returned for the truth." "What is it you want, then?" the dowager asked. "Money? A position?" Annalise looked at Arthur. Her heart was hammering, but not with fear. "Annalise," Arthur said, his voice rough. He stepped toward her, his eyes searching hers, desperate. I believed them. I sent you away. I let my duty, my fear of scandal, blind me. I failed you. I failed my own integrity. I cannot apologize enough." "I know," Annalise said, her voice softening. "You were trapped. We both were. Not anymore." He stopped, standing just before her. "You have returned, and you have set me free. But you came back for the truth, and so you shall have it." He turned to his mother. "Mother, I will not be marrying to secure a bloodline. I will not be marrying for an estate. I will be marrying for this." He turned back to Annalise. He didn't kneel. He didn't make a grand gesture. He simply spoke, his voice raw with an honesty that matched her own. "I have been a fool, Annalise Croft. I have been surrounded by hollow people, and when I found the only real person in my life, I threw her away. I will not make that mistake again." He took her hand, the hand of a scholar and a maid. "Marry me, Annalise. Be my Duchess. Be my partner, my equal. Be the woman who saves me from this world of lies." Annalise looked at this powerful, broken, and now wholly honest man. She looked at his hand, and then at his face. And she, the maid who had dared to speak back, gave her answer. Yes. The Ashworth Ball, held 6 months later, was the most talked-about event of the London season. The whispers had been rampant. The Duke had broken his engagement to Lady Beatrice Langley, who, along with her disgraced family, had fled to the continent. The Langley fortune had dissolved overnight, seized by the Crown and awarded to the rightful, bewildered farmer heirs. And the Duke of Ashworth, London's most eligible and powerful peer, had married his maid. The ballroom was ablaze with light from 10,000 crystals. The aristocracy of England was here, gathered like vultures, eager to see the common Duchess, to mock her, to witness her inevitable social failure. Lord Harrington was there, his monocle polished, ready to lead the charge. The doors to the ballroom opened. The announcer's voice boomed. His Grace, the Duke of Ashworth, and her Grace, Annalise, the Duchess of Ashworth. A hush fell. Every eye turned. Arthur entered, and he was not the tired, burdened man he had been. He was smiling, his eyes bright. Beside him, Annalise was a vision. She wore a gown of deep emerald green, the colour of her new station, and around her neck were the Ashworth emeralds, a necklace so priceless it was usually reserved for coronations. But it was not the jewels that stunned the room. It was her. She was not timid. She was not overwhelmed. She was radiant, her posture as straight and proud as any queen's. She carried her intelligence and her history not as a burden, but as armor. She was, they realized with a jolt, devastatingly beautiful. The Dowager Duchess Augusta sat on her dais, watching. She had fought the marriage, but Arthur had been immovable, and she had to admit, as she watched Annalise command the room, the girl had steel. The music began. The Duke led his new Duchess in the first waltz. They moved as one, their eyes locked, oblivious to the stairs. They were not a duke and a maid. They were simply a man and a woman, deeply in love. After the dance, the guests descended. Lord Harrington, whose own reputation had been slightly tarnished by his association with the Langleys, approached first, his smile slick. "Your Grace," he said, bowing to Annalise, his tone dripping with condescension. "You look utterly transformed. A far cry from Wiltshire, wouldn't you say? Or," he lowered his voice, "Chancery Lane." The small circle around them tensed, waiting for the Duchess to blush, to stammer, to fail. Annalise met his gaze, her own smile polite but icy. "I am not transformed, Lord Harrington," she said, her voice clear and carrying. "I am exactly the same woman I was when I was a maid. The only thing that has changed is your perception. Perhaps it is you who have learned to see." Harrington's smile froze. He had expected a servant. He had been addressed by a stateswoman. She continued, "And you are correct. It is a far cry from Wiltshire. My father, you'll recall, was the scholar Robert Croft, the one whose career you destroyed because his findings on Roman Britain contradicted yours." Harrington went pale. "I found his notes, my lord," Annalise said softly, adjusting her emeralds, "and I sent them, along with my own translations, to the Royal Archaeological Society last month. They are causing quite a stir. It seems my father's theories are about to be proven correct, and your entire body of work proven, well, fraudulent." Lord Harrington looked as if he had been struck by lightning. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. "It is a pleasure to see you, Lord Harrington," Annalise said, dismissing him with a regal nod. "Please do enjoy the champagne. Arthur, darling, I must speak with the French ambassador. His theories on Molière are fascinating." She swept away, leaving Lord Harrington frozen in place, utterly and completely humiliated. The crowd that had witnessed the exchange was silent. They had come expecting a circus. They had found a lioness. From that moment on, the tone of the night shifted. The whispers did not stop, but their nature changed. They were no longer whispers of mockery, but of awe and of fear. Annalise, the Duchess of Ashworth, moved through the room, discussing art with one peer, politics with another, philosophy with a third. She was more educated, more intelligent, and more graceful than any of them. She had not silenced them with shouts, or with cruelty, or with the flexing of her new power. She had silenced them with the one thing they could not combat, her sheer, undeniable competence. Later that night, Annalise stood on the terrace with Arthur, the cool air a relief. "You were magnificent," he murmured, pulling her close. "You have silenced the entire ton." "I just spoke the truth, Arthur," she whispered, leaning her head on his chest. "It seems to work better for me as a duchess than it did as a maid. I love you, Annalise, Duchess of Ashworth. And I love you, Arthur." She looked out over the gardens of her new home. She was no longer the maid who dared to speak back. She was the woman who had spoken, who had been heard, and who now, finally, had a voice that none would ever dare to silence again. And so, Annalise's journey came full circle. She proved that it isn't your station in life that defines you, but the content of your character and the strength of your mind. She faced down the snobbery, the cruelty, and the corruption of the aristocracy, and won, not by becoming like them, but by staying true to herself. The maid they tried to destroy became the Duchess they couldn't ignore. What did you think of Annalise's incredible story? Do you believe she was right to return, or should she have sought her revenge in a different way? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story of drama, romance, and ultimate triumph, please make sure to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs a story of a true underdog, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more dramatic stories just like this one. We appreciate your support more than you know. Thanks for watching.